The Retirement Cafe Podcast, episode 91. A Man is Not a Financial Plan, with Mary Waring.
Retired or thinking about retirement? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Retirement Cafe Podcast. In each episode, we bring you an important conversation with insight, tips and knowledge, all designed to help you live a fulfilling and successful life in retirement. Here's your host, Chartered Financial Planner and Accredited Later Life Advisor, Justin King.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe Podcast, which is sponsored by My Financial Planner. Not knowing when you can afford to retire or what your pensions will provide can be worrying. My Financial Planner provides independent, fixed-fee retirement planning advice, bringing clarity to your financial future. At My Financial Planner, we build a financial plan for your retirement and equip you with the knowledge to implement the plan and for you to purchase any products you need yourself rather than selling you pensions or investments. Find out more about getting a plan to fund the retirement you really want at myfinancialplanner.co.uk. Now, from my experience helping people retire successfully, I would say there is still a tendency for the man in a relationship to lead discussions about money. Now, that's not always the case, and I'm sure the situation is changing among the younger generations, but for those approaching retirement or already retired, it's traditionally been the husband who takes care of the finances. That was certainly the case for my wife's parents, and in fact, my mother-in-law, Anne, talks about the challenges she faced getting to grips with money matters after her husband died in episode 21 of the podcast. Take a listen when you have a moment, as it's a great personal story. So I thought it would be interesting to create a series of episodes about women and wealth, starting my conversation today with Mary Waring. Mary is an award-winning chartered financial planner and chartered accountant who helps women to be financially confident and independent. She specializes in supporting women through and after divorce, but is recognized as being a leading light in all aspects of female finances. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Mary Waring, the first in Series 5, Women and Wealth. Welcome, Mary, to the Retirement Cafe podcast.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, Mary, now, I've known of you for quite some time, but for those who don't know you, can you let our listeners know a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I run a business called Wealth for Women. It specializes in financial advice to women going through divorce.
Wow.
Typically, it's a female whose husband has looked after the finance. She's not an earner, so the amount she gets on divorce is generally all she's going to get.
Right.
And it's a very tricky time for her because she hasn't looked after the money. She's really unsure about everything to do with finance. So my company, I've set my stall out to say, if you're in this position and you're really concerned, come and talk to me and I'm going to look after you.
Yeah. Wow. That's have you worked in that kind of specific area for a long time?
No, I've actually came into financial services in 2012. So I'm just coming up to my 8th birthday, which is in a few weeks' time. My background is I'm a chartered accountant. So I worked as a finance director until 2005. Decided I wanted to do something on my own. And at that stage, I went into mortgage advice because I've got a property portfolio, interested in property.
Right.
And the market was booming and it was great. And I thought, why didn't I do this years ago? I really loved it. My business did really well. And then, of course, we had the 2008 financial crisis and my business effectively collapsed overnight because nobody was buying properties, nobody was lending on properties. And for a while I thought, well, it's all right. Let me give it a few months. It will sort. And of course, it didn't. And I had always wanted to be a financial advisor when I left accountancy. But when I looked into how many exams you had to do, that really put me off. And whilst I was running my mortgage business, and my mortgage business was very successful, I had little interest in doing hours and hours of exams. Of course, when I found I didn't have a successful business anymore, and I had quite a lot of time because I wasn't running a business, I thought, oh, let me just do the exams. And I just put my head down and withdrew them. And I think, I can't remember the timing now, but I went from mortgage advisor to chartered in about 12 months.
Wow.
I just put my head down and got on with the exams.
Amazing. And so you've now specialised in, obviously, in women and financial advice for women. What was it that drew you to that?
Well, when I was first studying and I looked, I realised that the number of women who are advisors is really low.
Yeah.
Figures I saw recently are it's about 18-19%. I think when I was first qualifying, it was much lower than that. And of course, there's nothing to say that male advisors can't help female clients. But I did think if you're female and you particularly want a female advisor for whatever reason, well, there's not many around. And that's why I thought, well, I might as well just, place all my emphasis on there and say, I'm female. If you want a female advisor, come and talk to me, which is where the Wealth for Women comes from. And then I found that a lot of my early clients were women going through divorce. Their husband had looked after the finance and they were totally overwhelmed. And so I thought, well, that's actually a pretty good market.
Yeah.
And fits in really well with my mother having been in exactly that situation, that my father had all the money. She ended up staying in a very unhappy marriage because she couldn't get out. He was not going to pay maintenance. He would have fought terribly. And so she stayed where she was because she didn't have money and didn't have any financial confidence. And I had thought that was her generation. But actually, when I first started doing advice, so many of the women coming to me were in exactly that position. So I didn't necessarily aim to go into this market. I think, those clients found me and I realised just how much help these ladies need. So I thought, right, well, that's quite a nice area to be in.
Now, obviously, the listeners to this podcast are often retirees themselves or people coming up to retirement. And for ladies getting divorced, maybe only a few years before retirement or even in retirement, that must be an amazing financial challenge for them.
It's tricky. It's really tricky. And of course, we have seen a real rise in the silver splitters, which I suspect is couples who were getting on okay when at least one of the partners was working. All of a sudden, when you're both retired and you're spending a huge amount of time together, that's when the cracks really start to show. And of course, if you're 65, you've got a life expectancy of another 20, 25 or more years. And if you're not happy, the thought of being unhappy for the next 20 years, no wonder we're seeing that rise. But it's a difficult time because the pain point for everyone is, have I got enough money?
Yeah.
And that's the situation, whether you're just retiring, whether you're married and retiring, whether you're divorced and you've got a lump sum. Yeah, that's really tricky. Have I got enough money to do whatever it is that I want to do?
Yeah. So what are your tips for someone who is possibly facing a breakup at the moment or even contemplating that it may happen or even going through it? What are the tips that they could use?
I think the first thing is, if they're in the situation where their partner has looked after all the finance, they need to start looking at it and understand the situation. A lot of clients I speak to are convinced that their husband has got whatever amount of money, and then a totally different amount gets disclosed. And they're convinced they should be more, they don't know what's happened to it, but they're making a best guess. They really do need to sit down and try to understand exactly what they've got in the pot. They need to start looking at maybe what they're spending, how much it costs to run the house, because these are all the questions that they're going to get asked when they go to speak to a solicitor. And if they really do think this is the route they need to go, I would recommend they go and get some initial advice from a solicitor, because they can have an initial meeting and the solicitor will tell them very, very vaguely what it might look like at settlement. And then they've got that as a basis for, is this the route that I'm happy to go?
Yeah, yeah. And so, once they've got that initial advice, it's initial thoughts. I can imagine that there are many challenges that anyone's going through that process will have. What do they what do they do next to become kind of well equipped, I suppose, to deal with everything that's going on?
Well, ideally, they need to talk to some professionals. Now, that's not easy, because if these ladies haven't spoken to an advisor before, it's a difficult situation. Problem with talking to friends will often tell you the wrong thing, for all the right reasons, but they don't know, or they'll tell you what you want to hear. In an ideal world, they should talk to an advisor who's going to be able to sit down and look at, well, this is the sort of amount of money you need. Maybe they'll even do a budget with them. I do that for a lot of my clients who, if they're told by a solicitor, go away and work out your budget and what you need, they haven't got a clue. And they panic. Fact is, if you sit down and talk to them and say, how often do you go out to the theatre or to the cinema and how much does it cost? They'll know. And actually, you can do a budget just by asking them the right questions. If they're left on their own to work it out, it is really, really tricky. A client of mine who came to me quite late in the stage, so she came to me when she'd already had the settlement, told me much later that her solicitor had asked her to do a spreadsheet of what she's spending, and she didn't know how to do a spreadsheet. Now, that was just a term used by the solicitor. If she'd written it out on a piece of paper, the solicitor would be happy with it. But she panicked that she didn't know how to do a spreadsheet. And she told me she spent ages and ages and ages on YouTube trying to work it out. And of course, her solicitor was then prompting her, saying, where's your spreadsheet? I need it. And the more she was prompted, the more she panicked about it. And it took her weeks and weeks and weeks. And she said she got herself in a real state about it. And that's the issue, that you've got really low confidence and you're then told to do something that you don't feel great about. Actually, it's just adding to the stress terribly.
Yeah. So what are the mistakes that women make when getting divorced?
A big mistake is not speaking to a solicitor. Right. I speak to a lot of clients who say, no, my husband and I are going to work it out between us. The problem is, of course you can do that, and you can do quite a lot of work that way. But I think you should always go and talk to a solicitor to then say, here are my circumstances. This is what we're looking at. Tell me, does it look sensible? Because if you and your partner between you have come up with a solution and the solicitor says, actually, you've really undersold yourself, you should be getting an awful lot more than this, you need to have that background. A lot of people don't want to use the solicitor because they think you're automatically going to end up in court. It's going to be very aggressive. But actually, there are an awful lot of other routes you can do. You can do mediation, you can do collab. And it doesn't mean that talking to a solicitor means it's all going to get aggressive. It means you need to find the right solicitor who's going to be able to do it in an appropriate way.
Right.
And the biggest mistake I see for women who aren't married is thinking they're a common law wife, particularly when there's children. A lot of people actually think if you've lived together for a certain period of time, you become a common law wife. And then particularly when children have come along, you were definitely a common law wife. Common law wife has no meaning whatsoever legally. You're not a wife, which means that there are very, very different rules on a settlement. And you potentially are entitled to absolutely nothing. So if it's the husband who's earning, that it's the husband's house, for example, that you moved into, the husband will need to, not husband, he's a partner, the father would need to support children, but he's under no obligation to support his partner.
Right.
And I speak to a number of women in that situation who say, oh, it's okay because we've been living together for X number of years, I'm a common law wife. And then you have to give them that bad news. Now, sometimes I've seen situations where the partners will work it out very fairly and have a view that although they didn't go through a marriage ceremony, they were effectively married. But the fact is that if the partner doesn't want to do that, you've got such lack of legal obligation there.
So do you think women should possibly, I mean, they may be in a happy marriage, but I see widows, for argument's sake, which in essence, you could be tantamount to a divorce. I mean, it's, and or suddenly adrift because they hadn't got the financial understanding that their husband had. What would your recommendation be to people in that circumstance? Or do you think, my marriage will always be fine, so I don't need to worry about learning understanding about money? What's your thoughts about that?
I see it with my clients. It's really, really common. The wife looks after the children, she looks after the house, she looks after the husband, she does all those duties, and the husband deals with the money. And when you're married, that's absolutely fine because you don't want to be doubling up on both of you doing it. But actually what you need to do is sit down, once a month, once a quarter, and look at exactly what you've got, where it is, what's happening, whether you're on track, etc. Because I say to a lot of women who come to me, and they're not going through divorce, but they want a quick discussion, you're also catering for what happens if your husband, like you say, what happens if he dies? What happens if he ends up, something dreadful, he has a stroke and he's in hospital and there's a certain chunk of money, but you've got no idea where it is. You've got no idea how much it costs to run the house. So I think it's fine, split the responsibilities, and if you don't want to do the finance and your husband does it, well, that's absolutely fine, but sit down and discuss it. Yeah. So, God forbid, if something awful happened, you at least understand what money you've got and where it is, even if you're not sure what to do with it after that.
And I must admit, though, I have had many occasions where the roles are very reversed, and it's the woman who has got a total handle on the finances, full understanding, and the husband has left it all to them. And so, yes, it does roll both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But it's the same thing. If only one of you is dealing with the finances, make sure you're discussing it with the other so that you both understand. And also, you should both be making decisions about it. I remember seeing clients a while ago and they weren't getting divorced, and she told me, no, she didn't have a pension. It's okay. Her husband was contributing, and the plan always was that pension would be enough for the two of them. And that's fine until I went to speak to them. And he said, no, there's not enough money in my pension for both of us at all. So she had thought that there should have been enough money. And in fact, there wasn't. Far from it. So you both need to make decisions as to what have we got, what do we need, is there enough, there's not enough, what do we need to do to make sure there will be enough when we want to draw on it.
Yeah. And is your experience now that pensions are fairly valued in divorce settlements, and there is an equalisation of income in retirement?
Yeah, I've seen very, very fair settlements coming through. And of course, pensions now, other than, of course, there's a whole tax issue involved, are like cash, aren't they? If you wanted to take a huge chunk of your money out of your pension, you could, unlike the earlier rules. Now, pensions are so much more flexible, it's given them a lot more value.
And do you suggest to your, when you have a scenario where, one partner has the lion's share of a pension and the other one doesn't, the spouse doesn't, what's your recommendation around that? Are you trying to get the party without much of a pension to build up a pension of their own?
Are you talking about when a couple are together?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think what you need to do is maximise that joint pot. And if one party has so much money in a pension that there's going to be tax issues when they draw it, either because of lifetime allowance or they're going to be drawing it at a higher tax rate, well, then put some money into the other partner's pension instead, because what you're looking at is, this is the pot of money. How do we make it go as far as possible?
Yeah.
And I've done that actually very recently with clients who he wanted to add some extra money. I suggested it didn't go into his pension because he was going to hit a lifetime allowance, and we're putting it in hers instead because she wasn't contributing large amount at all to the pension. So whilst he was quite keen to have it now and have the tax relief and everything, it was probably going to hit a problem.
Yeah.
Next month.
Yeah. And so, do you work with younger couples also, kind of setting out in life and trying to get their finances in order right at the beginning of their careers?
No, my clients tend to be much older. My clients are sort of 50 and upwards. Not that I've necessarily gone out looking for that, but I charge fixed fees, unlike a lot of advisors who charge percentages. And my fixed fee has been based on if I had my ideal client coming through the door, and she's generally a high net worth client, what would my charges be? So therefore, someone with a lower amount of money, my fees are too large. So if I have that discussion with someone on the phone, I will say to them, I'm not the right advisor for you because my fees are disproportionate to the amount of money that you've got. And then I refer them to someone else.
Yeah. And I think in my experience, it is also the case. It can be more of a challenge for women to build up savings and retirement in their own names purely because of their careers. If they take time out to be a mum, then there's obviously a period of not saving.
Yeah.
How would you suggest someone kind of counteracts that?
It's tough, isn't it? Because actually, if they've taken time out or they go back to work and they're part-time, there's a reduction in money.
Yeah.
It's hard. If there's still enough money coming in, well, then you should be investing in your ISA or your pension. But, children are expensive. If you also want to maybe save up because you want to send them to private school and you've got reduced hours and reduced income, it comes down to priorities. It's hard because the first answer is you should make sure you always keep saving. But actually, if there's not enough money, well then, it's not so easy to do that.
No, it's difficult, isn't it? And challenging. But I mean, I think obviously with the work you do and the work I do, that at least if you're informed about what you need to be saving, that you've got, that's half a plan, isn't it?
Exactly. And yeah, it's understanding what you should be doing, why you should be doing it. And even if you're only saving a small amount every single month is going to build up over time and is going to be better than doing nothing. Because again, there are a lot of people who think, oh, it's only a small amount, it's not worth doing. But actually, if you do it month after month after month, it will be worth it. It's probably not going to be a huge amount, but it's better than not doing anything at all.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm not sure whether this is your quote or someone else's, but a man is not a financial plan.
It's my book. It's my book, The Wealthy Woman, A Man is Not a Financial Plan. And the reason for the title is it's actually meant to make you laugh. It's meant to be light-hearted, but the underlying message is serious, which is take control of your finances yourself.
Yeah.
And again, and the book, it's a down-to-earth guide about, firstly, why you need to look after your finances.
Great.
So, you know, a lot of the reasons that I've heard before, oh, it's okay, my husband's got enough money. Well, actually, are you sure there's enough money for two of you? A lot of people think maybe the state pension will sort them. You know, state pension, 8,500, 8,600, that is not going to go far. People who think, oh, I'm going to have an inheritance. Well, you don't know when your parents are going to die. You don't know if they're going to go into care and actually spend all that money. So it goes through sort of the reasons why people might not be saving and saying these aren't great reasons. It goes through at different ages, you know, 20s, 30s, 40s, etc. The excuse a lot of people have, oh, I've got debt now, I need to save for private school, I need this, I'll do it afterwards. And of course, afterwards never comes. You've always got other priorities. And then it looks at, well, what do you need to do? And there it does go through an example of saving child allowance from, you know, when you get it up to age 18, and I can't remember the numbers, but, you know, child allowance is not a big number. And it looks at, well, how that can build up. The idea is to show actually doing a small amount, doing it regularly is worth doing, and don't stop doing it just because you think your number isn't big enough and you think you need to be saving, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds each month. Just save what you can. And also, if you get into that mindset of saving, chances are when you can afford to, you're going to put in a little bit more. But the longer you leave it not doing it, the harder it becomes mentally to start.
Yeah.
And the harder it becomes because you need to start putting more in to get to the same figure.
Yeah. Wise advice. Advice. So, well, it's been fascinating chatting to you this morning, Mary. Where can people find out more about you and your book and maybe reach out to you if necessary?
Yeah, well, my website is wealthforwomen.biz. So 4 is FOR rather than anything else. So wealthforwomen.biz. There's a contact page there for anyone who wants to talk to me. For anyone going through divorce or thinking they might be going on that route, there is a download 7 steps women make going through divorce. It's a 7 different videos that come through.
Great.
But yeah, anyone can contact me. I do a free discussion on the phone. If I can help someone on the phone, very happy to help them, even if they're not someone who will end up being a client. Yeah, if I can help them on the phone and guide them, very happy to do it. If I think they need financial advice and maybe I'm not the right person for them, I can signpost them to someone else.
Great. And is your book available on Amazon?
On Amazon. Yeah, it's on Amazon. Yeah.
We'll put all of those notes in the show notes on the website at the retirementcafe.co.uk. as I say, once again, thanks for chatting to me this morning. I really lovely to hear that you're doing this specific work and helping so many women be more successful in their financial lives. So well done to you. I commend you for the great work that you're doing, and thank you for chatting with me this morning.
Thank you, Justin. That's really kind of you. Thank you.
Thanks once again to Mary for taking the time to speak with me. To find out more about Mary and the work that she does, check out the show notes on our website at theretirementcafe.co.uk, where you'll find some useful links, including links to other episodes in the series Women and Wealth. As ever, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really does help. And be sure to subscribe either on our website or your preferred podcast player so you never miss an episode. That way you'll also be alerted to other episodes in this series. To find out who's coming next on the podcast, head to theretirementcafe.co.uk. And if you would like to suggest a guest, please connect with me on Twitter at JustinKingCFB or drop me an email at hello@theretirementcafe.co.uk. Thanks as always to My Financial Planner, the fixed fee retirement planning specialist, for sponsoring the podcast. You can find out more about how they can help bring clarity to your retirement and your pension plans at myfinancialplanner.co.uk. So until next time, this is Justin King helping you feel more informed in your retirement.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Cafe podcast with Justin King. To find out more, you can find us online at theretirementcafe.co.uk.